Hello and welcome to another video by Rick Miracle Me in my series Freemasonry and Satanism. This will be a continuation of series 144. Part 1 I did on Crossfire, the plot that killed Kennedy. Super information in this book. Go buy it if you want to know the truth. Jim Marrs died a couple days ago, sadly to say. I've been watching his videos along with many other people who investigate what's going on in the world. The things going on to bring us the New World Order. And apparently a new age. They want to discredit and demonize, believe it or not, Jesus and Christianity. So in the end times, up is supposed to be down, down is supposed to be up. And there have been a lot of preparations for this New World Order. I've been making videos since 2013, September. I started my research after I got back from Costa Rica on a big zero birthday in 2005. So at the end of this year will be 13 years. And I'm up to series 144. Part 2, I'll use one of Jim Marrs' other books, seeing that I talked about the conspiracy behind President John Kennedy's death. It's only fitting I do one on this book, The Terror Conspiracy, 9/11, Deception, and the Loss of Liberty. So that's what the New World Order is all about. It's like a Hunger Games movie. The elites, the aristocrats who think they're better than the rest of us, will live better than they do now, in greater opulence. And they will lord over the rest of us, believing there's some kind of semi-god or something. And what God do they serve? My research tells me, believe it or not, Lucifer, Satan, and I can back that up if you just go look up satanic rituals, whether it's YouTube videos or in the Main Street News. I mean, even presidents and dignitaries and newspaper outlets were all freaking out at the Switzerland tunnel opening in the Alps. Demons dropping from the sky, on wires of course, with horns, trainload of seemingly naked people groping each other. And of course there's a bunch of people watching my videos and other stuff, and they're going, what's wrong with that? Get with the new age, Rick. You're behind times. Things are changing. And don't talk about 9/11. It was years ago. Who cares? John Kennedy, who killed him? It was years ago. Who cares? Sandy Hook shooting? That's old news. I don't care if there's a lot of information out there, evidence, that seems to indicate that it was a false flag. Boston bombing on 666 Boylston Street. Oklahoma City building. This will be my next series 145. I already wrote it on the back there. The Oklahoma City bombing and the politics of terror. Get it? Got it? So I'm just going to read a little bit from this book. I pre-read some material, as you can see. And just a few pages. I'm not trying to do a audio book. But I think when I read the exact words in the page and throw in my 2 cents, and if you want to really look into it, if you care, which a lot of people don't seem to care, which is probably why we're in the problems we have right now. But a lot of people do care, but they feel helpless. And in my case, I did a lot of research, used to write comments on press releases, talking to my friends and family, got a lot of feedback, and found out that a lot of people don't want to talk about anything. All they want to do is go and have a good time and make it through their day. So what are you going to do? All you can do is what you do. So I'm going to start out on page 60. What caused the collapse of WTC, World Trade Center Building 7? So we already know that Building 1 and 2, the towers, were hit by planes, so it appears. Buildings have been hit by planes before, and they didn't fall down. And they were steel structures with a steel column in the middle. It's where you would have your elevators, also stairs. And then there were columns all wrapped all the way around the building. All interconnected on every floor with cement floors, if you've ever watched one of these tall buildings built. So you got all the steel, all the cement, glass walls, windows. They didn't use any serious wood or flammable material. And they had sprinkler systems, and they were built to be fire resistant. So why did they both fall? As if demolition materials were installed. And what they do is they wrap a small demolition device, like a dynamite or a small bomb, around each of the steel girders, and around this one, around this one, around this one, around this one, and then the next floor, around this one again, around this one, every single one in a strategic place. So when they push the button, it severs the steel. Boom, boom, boom. I don't have to explain this. People probably already know. So it's a science. It takes quite a while to set that all up. And then the buildings, if they're nuclear type explosives, and they do have small nuclear type explosives, and if you explode them in a sequence, it pulverizes the concrete, which is what happened. All the concrete turned into dust, and it was all over Manhattan, 1 or 2, 3 inches thick. If it was just breaking apart and collapsing, you would have still seen a structure there. It might be mangled, part of it might have fell, might have listed over to the left or listed over to the right. It would have been something like ruins, like the buildings you saw with the bombings of Germany or whatever. Or even the bombing over there in Japan with the nuclear bombs. There would still be some remnant of the building left, like in the nuclear bombs in Japan. But that wasn't the case. It was professional. And then Building 7, which was only 40 stories high, not 100 or so. Ridiculous for it to fall like a pancake. Like there was nothing to stop it all from... No gravity there at all. I mean, nothing to inhibit the gravity. So let me read from the book. The 47-story Building 7 was an oddity. This is Jim Mars and many other people, as you will see in this book. To begin with, so Building 7 free falling was an oddity, you think? And then Building 1 and Building 2 falling exactly the same way on its own footprint is certainly odd. I mean, if something happened to one of them, you might say, okay, I'll give you that. But 2, you go, wait a minute, that's just too incredible. And then the third one, not hit by a plane, with no flames in the windows, hardly. And in all 3 buildings, there were flashes in the windows. Things were going off, explosions. People heard the explosions. That's all recorded. But apparently we have a government controlling our world. Or I should say we have some secret society entities who have taken over our government. And they think that we, the people, will just sit by and do nothing and say nothing course, some people have spoken out, and a lot of them are dead. So, as it housed two New York electrical substations, which existed there prior to construction of the building, so apparently there was an electrical substation on the ground, and they actually built the building over the electrical substation. Stuff you learn when you read these books. These substations housed 10 transformers, 35 feet tall, 40 feet wide. Additionally, as noted, Mayor Giuliani's Emergency Command Center was located there along with 3 500 kilowatt generators for emergency power. Both the command center and other operations in the building stored an estimated 42,000 gallons of diesel fuel for auxiliary generators. Of special interest is the fact that some of that power may have been used by the CIA, Department of Defense, or Secret Service, all of which had offices in the building, Building 7. So I suppose all their files and records of entities they were investigating on were all destroyed. Just like Oklahoma City building, that's what's in here. CIA, FBI, people had offices in here. All those records of ongoing investigations, all destroyed. How convenient was that? Shortly after 4 p.m. on September 11th, 6 hours after the collapse of the South Tower, firemen turned their attention to Building 7. After someone reported small fires. But firemen who were allowed to enter the building, as they had in the towers, were ordered out at 11:30 a.m. At 5:25 p.m., the 47-story structure suddenly collapsed into its footprint. So they went into the building at 11:30. They were ordered out of the building at 11:30, and so they just let it burn, causing very little damage to adjacent structures, the Verizon building and the U.S. Post Office. Although no real explanation of the collapse had been offered, it has been reported that the small fires grew larger, reached the stored fuel, and started a conflagration so intense it melted the steel frame of a building, causing it to crumple. It didn't crumple. If you watch the pictures, it free fell. Crumpling would be like that. And I don't think the 47,000 gallons of fuel was all spread out evenly. It was probably in one huge tank somewhere, one area. So then the building would have, again, listed over or something. Just me thinking. But let me read what the experts say. Hushmed dismissed this version by noting, every photo taken of Building 7 shows only a few tiny fires in only a few windows, and only tiny amounts of smoke were produced. So barely was the building on fire. He said, I would think that a fire of the magnitude necessary to collapse a steel building would have set fire to a lot of office furniture, carpeting, and other flammable objects. This in turn would have caused a lot of flames to be visible in a lot of windows, don't you think? I also suspect that such a large fire would have caused many windows to shatter, so all that heat would have blown out windows. How could an incredible fire burn in the building without any photos showing evidence of large flames or tremendous plumes of smoke. This is Tex Marr's book, The Terror Conspiracy. Oh, 3 fingers thick. How many pages? 477 pages. I highly recommend getting some of Tex Marr's books. You can find them at bookstores or used book sites. He wrote a lot of books about a lot of these ongoing false flags or inside jobs, trying to create a new paradigm in our world. And generally speaking, even like global warming, they like to blame it on we the people. Pollution, sustainability. We did it. We did it. We didn't do any of this. We're not trying to control the world. And I've made a lot of videos. I've got about 500 hours of videos on YouTube. And there's thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of hours of other people's material. All kinds of alternate websites. A lot of people have looked into this. And a lot of people have suffered some horrible deaths as a result of their research. And you can watch videos on that. Unlike the Twin Towers, which collapsed from the top down, Building 7 collapsed from the bottom up. The classic form of a typical building demolition. In fact, this might have indeed been the case. So there's some smarter people than me writing these books, like Jim Marrs. I read the books and I report. Just years ago, when I learned all that I learned after reading books for almost 10 years, I said, man, everybody needs to know this stuff. And most of the books I read were published in 1950, 60, 70, 80. And people today have no clue that they exist. Some of them are in the 1800s, about the secret societies, the Freemasons, the occult, the Illuminati. Written by rabbis and famous Jewish people, speeches, Benjamin Friedman's famous speech. Go look it up and listen to it. Don't believe me, but believe the well-known Jewish man who had connections everywhere, his speech in New York. All right, so we know they want to bring about a new world order. They've said it enough times. President George Bush Sr. said, out of the chaos and anarchy will come the new world order. The Pope's calling for a new world order. One world currency, one world government. And they're not doing it for sustainable reasons for our benefit. By no means. All right, on September 2002, during a PBS documentary entitled America Rebuilds, World Trade Center leaseholder Larry Silverstein had this to say about Building 7. I remember getting a call from the fire department commander telling me that they were not sure they were going to be able to contain the fire. And I said, we've had such terrible loss of life. Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it. And they made that decision to pull, and we watched the building collapse. Well, you do not have to be a rocket scientist to know that you don't rig up a building for demolition in a couple hours. It had to be pre-rigged. So it's people in here, experts have even agreed. It's evident that Building 1 and Building 2 were pre-rigged also. There was more involved than some Arabs flying a plane into one of the buildings. The term pull in industry slang for the controlled demolition of a structure as voiced by a New York fire commander who told TV News, pulling the heavily damaged WTC Building 7. The idea that a modern 47-story steel building can totally collapse strictly due to fire is something outside of normal experience, yet no serious investigation was undertaken. And even on the Twin Tower government report, they don't even mention Building 7. You think it wasn't an inside job? Who could think it wasn't an inside job? But there will be people who watch my video, or if you type a comment on press releases, they'll give you a thumbs down and say you're a conspiracy theorist. I guess being in denial or knowing the truth would cause people to say such things. Not wanting to know who really killed Kennedy, although most of us are aware that it was an inside job. If you read this book here or others on the book or watch videos, the same thing with 911. It doesn't take a lot of effort. Sandy Hook, Boston bombing, even the London train station bombing. In most of these cases, they were having similar war games, exercises going on at the same time. Even during the 911 event. They were actually flying planes in the sky in fake running planes into buildings, war games, exercises, with Dick Cheney in charge. It's in these books. It's in Webster Tarpley's 911 Synthetic Terror. All right. So like I said, you start reading these books, you start learning a lot. All right, so for more than 3 months, structural steel from World Trade Center has been and continues to be cut up and sold for scrap. I think I lost my place there. FEMA's report, cause of WTC collapses unknown. There's an interesting story about FEMA in this book. All right. The public might know more of what really happened. The public might know more of what really happened to the WTC, World Trade Center, if the New York Police Department and the New York Fire Department had been allowed to do their jobs. You think? But as with the JFK assassination, their work was taken from them by federal authorities. Who controls the federal government? Not we the people, who immediately closed doors and shut out the public from their consultations. People were even arrested for taking photographs of Ground Zero. The FBI took charge of the criminal investigation, while the little understood Federal Emergency Management Agency took responsibility for determining what happened to cause the collapse of the Twin Towers. FEMA seemed determined to haul away the evidence, even before a full and impartial investigation could be made. Such premature destruction of evidence was called into question by Bill Manning, editor of the 125-year-old fireman's publication, Fire Engineering, in its January 2002 issue. For more than 3 months, structural steel from the World Trade Center has been and continues to be cut up and sold for scrap, wrote Manning. Did they throw away the locked doors from the Triangle Stairways fire? So that was another fire in a building? So apparently they didn't throw away that stuff. Did they throw away the gas can used in the Happy Land Social Club fire? I suspect they didn't. Did they cast away the pressure regulating valves at the Meridian Plaza fire? Of course not, it says here. But essentially, that's what they're doing at the World Trade Center. For more than 3 months, structural steel from the World Trade Center has been and continues to be cut up and sold for scrap. Crucial evidence that could answer many questions about the high-rise building, design practices, and performance under fire conditions is on the slow boat to China. Literally, they shipped that stuff off to China right away. As if they couldn't have melted it down here in the United States. Keep jobs in America, maybe? Or do you think they had something to hide? Perhaps never to be seen in America until you buy your next car. Challenging the theory of the Twin Towers collapse as a result of crashed airlines and fires, Manning added, fire engineering has good reasons to believe that the official investigation, blessed by FEMA, a federal organization, and run by the American Society of Civil Engineers, ASCE, is a half-baked farce. This is the editor of the fire engineering publication. Wow. That may already have been commandeered by political forces whose primary interest, to put it mildly, lie far afield of full disclosure. So he's insinuating for political reasons they did not want this investigated, and the same thing happened with Kennedy's death. Assassination. Who controls America? And I keep saying it, look up Prime Minister Sharon of Israel in a heated argument in his Congress. And he screams out, don't worry about America, we control America, and the Americans know it. And then, if you don't believe that, look up Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and what he said in Fink's Bar. That ought to get the ball rolling in your mind thinking. Don't believe me? Look it up. Except for a marginal benefit obtained from a 3-day visual walkthrough of evidence sites conducted by the ASCE Investigation Committee members, so described by one close source as a tourist trip. No one's checking the evidence for anything. So they did take people through there on a quick tourist tour. You'd probably be arrested if you tried to grab any samples of the dust or whatever, steel. Or if you tried to take pictures, they probably didn't allow that, where the steel would have been severed by demolition devices. The destruction and removal of evidence must stop immediately, Manning declared. In that same issue, a number of fire officials, including a retired deputy chief from the New York Fire Department, called on FEMA to immediately impanel a World Trade Center disaster review panel to coordinate a complete review of all aspects of the World Trade Center incident. So some people wanted to prevent any further events if a plane could take down a building, but the investigation was not allowed. To the 99th degree, they didn't want anybody to investigate. Apparently, with all the evidence I've seen, there was certainly something to hide. Look what happened afterwards, blaming it on Arabs, most of whom had nothing to do with it. And the cities and towns relentlessly destroyed for more than 10 years, and it's continuing today. And then they cause distractions all over the world, so people aren't paying attention to what's going on in Syria right now. It's pretty obvious if you want to look into this stuff, what's going on. They want this New World Order. They had Jade Helm 15 in 2015 with equipment and troops going all over the United States and exercising testing software that will make making decisions whenever they do whatever they're going to do. Taking people out, assassinating people, killing people, will be those decisions will be made from meta tags by computers. In other words, who people might have talked to, who you know, do you own a gun, have you what books you might have purchased, conversations they have on you on the phone, what you think about the government. Are you an anti-government belligerent? Just saying. Anyways, back to the book. In that same issue, a number of fire officials, including a retired deputy chief from New York's fire department, called on FEMA to immediately impanel a World Trade Center disaster review panel. I just read that. These fire officials noted that the World Trade Center disaster was the largest loss of firefighters ever at one incident, the second largest loss of life on American soil, the first total collapse of a high-rise during a fire in the United States history, and the largest structural collapse in recorded history. So, but without a doubt, this was a seriously unusual event to have one building free fall, never mind two, and never mind a third that wasn't hit by a plane. So certainly it could have been a poor manufacturing, construction. They could have really cheated on the materials. But we'll never know, will we? Whatever the reason, of course, they had to cover it up. And that's not just me saying that. Go buy this book. Or many other books. And I have other books. I'll be reading the other books. I'll be making videos on the other books. Now, with that understanding, you would think that we would have the largest fire investigation in world history. Wouldn't you think? Or killing, assassinating a president? Why did they cover that up and delay that? It seems like a lot of the same people were connected to these issues. Who would have thought that? World War I, World War II, Kennedy's assassination, 9/11, and so much more. I've gone over the Encyclopedia Judaica, and this planning or working towards the establishment of the State of Israel in Palestine has been going on for hundreds of years. And in the Encyclopedia Judaica, the encyclopedia manufactured, created in Israel, even says the communist, these Zionist Jewish people were behind that for a couple hundred years. So it was hand in hand with controlling governments and banks, the Illuminati. The 100 years after they took over the Federal Reserve in the United States in 1913, the 100 years prior to that, they were doing the same thing and controlling the banking industry in Germany and other places in the world. These elitists, these Illuminati type, Kabbalah types. Some people who think that they are divine and better than the rest of us, whether they call us Goy or Goyim, which means cattle, or from the secret societies, Freemason organizations, Rosicrucians, etc., calling us profane. You think they think they're better than us? That we're just there to be slaves? Look up what Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said in Fink's Bar. That'll speak volumes if you believe it. Now, with that understanding, you would think that we would have the largest fire investigation in world history, they wrote. You would be wrong. Instead, we have a series of unconnected and uncoordinated, superficial inquiries. Ironically, we will probably gain more detailed information about the destruction of the planes than we will about the destruction of the towers. We are literally treating the steel removed from the site like garbage, not like crucial fire scene evidence. Complaints from the Federal Investigation Team of engineers supported these accusations. The Federal Investigation Team of Engineers, they supported these accusations. So even some of the government federal departments were wondering why this was happening. And again, I'm not reading everything. I highlighted some stuff. I'll read that, make my comments. Jim Marrs, go buy his book. He's written many books. Jim Marrs. People need to be purchasing these books and reading them and sharing them with their friends. We need to wake up America and wake up the world. That's my opinion. August 5th, 2017 today, Saturday. Who knows? I was listening to Steve Quayle on one of those talk shows yesterday and this morning. They were discussing that a probable and likely collapse, intentional, of the economic system could happen this fall. And on a lot of the videos on YouTube about the Planet X or Nibiru, they're now saying it looks like that'll be September 23rd, 2017, this fall. So why are they creating all this propaganda and fear for we the people? Why are they preparing for something huge? A lot of people just want to ignore it. They think it'll go away, but it doesn't go away. Even when President Donald Trump took office, almost immediately the mother of all bombs was dropped in Afghanistan. And 59 missiles were launched at Syria. And Syria is still under serious assault. So whatever their plans are, they've been very methodical and persistent about it for over 100 years. They brought us World War I, World War II, 9/11, assassinated presidents like from Panama or Ecuador. They've sent men out there who were trained to help countries borrow money from the World Bank or the International Money Fund with full intentions of bankrupting those countries. And the situation was much worse, if not devastating, to the citizens. John Perkins, Confessions of an Economic Hitman. I just made the book review on that book. And so much more. Up to 144 with this one in my series. Over 300 videos on YouTube. And go to my website, rickmiracle.com. Look on the left-hand side. You should be able to find a list of all my book reviews, the series, and how many books, part 1, part 8, part 12. I made 2 hours, 12 videos, 12 2-hour videos on the Blue Lodge Freemasonry Handbook. I wanted to make it really clear what goes on in those training and rituals they do when they recruit new people to get your first degree, your second degree, your third degree, your fourth degree, swearing on a Bible, having your throat cut if you divulge the information. 12 2-hour videos. Series 61. Alright, so there's more in this book I highlighted. The team never had access, so there were some people trying to investigate 911, but the team never had access to 911 emergency calls. Why would they not allow the investigators to have access to those calls? Which could have helped determine exactly what happened in the minutes prior to the collapse of the buildings, and thus cannot be emphasized enough. And they had to really work at getting the building design plans, but they did get them, and they found that the floor supports were attached to exterior columns by strong welds, not as widely believed, relatively small bolts. So apparently the buildings were stronger then they were told strong welds that held all those columns together instead of small boats, which was widely believed. Skipping another whole page here, the NIST inquiry, so the people who were investigating the 9/11 event, declined to hear testimony from the New York firemen or building engineers, despite repeated efforts on their part to contact the panel. So officials from the fire department in New York were refused access to their information by the NIST committee investigating the event. And that's like right now when the congressman or House of Representative or even presidents, a lot of people are now saying President Donald Trump is not following through on his commitments to drain the swamp. As a matter of fact, he's bringing in all the cronies that had been there before. They really do disregard what we the people have to say or think. And the more the people wake up about it, the faster they have to move to bring about what they want to bring about. This Hunger Games movie type of reality, depopulating the planet. These elites who control our world are very sinister people. I can't emphasize that enough from my research. Think about it. As we have seen, the large gaps left by the dismal official record of reporting on the WTC collapses have been filled by others. Perhaps the best information that we now have about the collapse of the towers comes from independent researchers, most notably from a growing list of courageous scientists and academics noted earlier, whose names can be found listed on the website scholarsfor911truth.org. Scholarsfor911truth.org. So when was this book published? 2006. So I highly recommend going on the bookstores or used book websites and buy these books by Jim Marrs and many other books I go over. John Perkins, Confessions of an Economic Hitman. The books on channeling I've been going over. Pole Shift. I went over that book by John White. Crossing the Rubicon, Michael Rupert. So many books. Major Trends in Mysticism. That one book, Germany Must Perish. The Phoenix Journals you can buy on the internet. Free website with all the Phoenix Journals. Lots of valuable information. It's like 122 books. I'll be addressing those books again. Others have long noted that the physical characteristics of the collapses of the two towers were almost identical. So you can have a fluke once, but a fluke twice is not a fluke. A fluke 3 times is certainly not a fluke. Building 7, just free fall and not even hit by a plane. So common sense would already tell most people that the people trying to bring us the New Age and New World Order and all this transgenderism and pansexualism and discrediting the religious organizations and creating all these false flags, creating legislation to restrict our movements and our rights. It's all moving forward like a freight train. And nobody's trying to stop the train. Or at least people might be chasing the train, like you might see in a movie. But nobody's managed to grab on and get up front and pull the brakes. Somehow we have to do that to this New World Order. Globalizing everything giving certain corporate and elitist aristocratic entities who think that they are some kind of gods and they actually worship some kind of evil god is not going to be good for we the people on planet Earth. Is it? All right, moving on the book here. So the collapse of the two towers were almost identical. That has permitted one physicist and pioneer critic of the official story, Jim Hoffman. That's so weird. It's David Hoffman that wrote this book on Oklahoma City building. Of 911research.wtc7.net to compile a list below that describes principal features of the destruction of both towers. These observations are based on intensive independent study of the surviving evidence as contrasted with the official explanation, although, as we have seen, in truth there is none, of a gravity collapse caused by fire. So there never has been another building that collapsed by fire. One can easily see the critical mysteries about the tower's collapse remain unsolved, in large part due to the destruction of evidence and the underfunded investigations earlier noted. So if you read these books by serious investigators, you will see any attempt to investigate what really happened were hampered by the federal government. And what happened after that? A relentless pursuit to overthrow countries in the Middle East. As the old saying, in crimes, follow the money. And if you see what happened after 9/11 and you look and see about the 200 years effort with Zionism to get the Palestinians land, to create the state of Israel, which has prophecies that they will be the aristocrats of the world, even with some kind of antichrist. The preparations have been going on a long time. It took World War I and World War II to even get to the point of 9/11. And now that we're in, apparently, World War III, when is it going to become very obvious to everybody? And when the people then protest and try to prevent it, what will be the retaliation against the people? Will the people become the enemy? Seems likely there's a bad day coming, I keep saying. The evidence is clear. Smarter people than I wrote these books. All right, number one, the cores of the towers were obliterated and the perimeter walls were shredded. Or according to Hoffman, there is no gravity collapse scenario or probable explanation by fire that can account for the complete leveling of the massive columns that comprise the tower's cores, or the ripping apart of their sturdy perimeter walls. But if not, what scenario does explain this? So those beams did not evaporate like the concrete. When they fell into a pile of rubble, seemingly, according to my research, of similar size, which I guess would happen if you had to go in each building and place it at the same place on each floor. Those chunks would all be the same size, and apparently they were. And of course there were pools of molten lava, melted steel, that I guess existed for days, and that's evidence of some kind of certain type of nuclear explosives. I forget what the name of that was. All right, moving on to number 2 by this physicist, Jim Hoffman. Nearly all the concrete was pulverized in the air, so finely that it blanketed parts of lower Manhattan with inches of dust. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist to think about this. Even if there was a huge fire, huge fires does not pulverize concrete. And even if you went onto the top of a 10-story building and threw out a big slab of concrete, just tossed it over and let it fall 10 stories, it's going to break up in chunks, in half, 3/4, some small pieces, right? It's not going to just turn into a pile of dust. That takes explosives. So it couldn't be done by falling, and it couldn't be done by fire. Throw a big piece of cement into your barbecue fire next time you're grilling all day long, or a bonfire. See if it turns into dust. If it did, we would know it. A lot of buildings would be a problem, wouldn't they? All right, so there would not be enough energy to pulverize the concrete until it hit the ground. With regard to this observation, and if it did pulverize when it hit the ground, not as it was falling, how would that dust get all over town? That had to come from up here in the air. You know, when the wind would blow a little bit of it. Like I said, reading these books, using your brain, you have to know that 911 was an inside job. And if you read some other books like Webster Tarpley's 911, I believe that was one of my early videos, number 18. Go look up my videos I made reading right from that book, 911 Synthetic Terror. Very detailed information. All kinds of little suspicious activities. So suspicious, it's not a suspicion. It's absolute proof. Who was in charge of security at airports is in that book. Who was in charge of security of the Twin Towers? Why were the Twin Towers closed off on weekends? And construction crews doing something there, and whose brother was in charge of that security group, and so much more. Webster Tarpley's 911 Synthetic Terror, and even this book, without a doubt, absolutely invaluable information. With regard to this observation, the crucial unanswered questions becomes, how then was it possible for a non-metallic components of the building to turn to dust as fine as flour? Oh yeah, I forgot. The name of those devices were thermite, nuclear. Thermite bombs used in demolition leaves residues of the thermite, which is nuclear. As you know, radiation stuff doesn't go away quickly. And so you had molten pools of steel at the bottom of the platform where the buildings were that existed for days. And it raised everyone's suspicion. How can that happen? Okay, so the concrete turned to dust as fine as flour. That would have been thermite, without a doubt. And further, to begin to appear so massively at the very outset of the collapse. So there were even flashes of lights in the windows indicating demolition devices. Go watch people's videos on YouTube. There's a lot of good ones. But when people believe what happened, what are we going to do about it? All right, it's Sunday, August 6th, 2017, and I want to continue this video, finish it today. Before I head up into the Smoky Mountains, going up on the Parkway this afternoon, on this beautiful day in the mountains of North Carolina. Anyways, back to this physicist explanation and theory about 911. Independent scientists cited by Hoffman in a highly technical paper have shown that the energy required for the pulverization of this much concrete and for the stupendous expansion of the dust cloud is as much as 100 times greater than could have been produced from each tower's gravitational potential energy, i.e. mass times gravitational acceleration times height. So if you calculate dropping all that cement from the maximum height at the maximum speed at the time that it took, you could never generate enough energy to do what did happen. Of course, the explanation is thermite, other types of explosives or destructive energy. Again, I say, you know, some of this stuff is obvious, but why are the people so apathetic? Almost like they're in a state of existence where they can't do anything. It's like somebody's dehumanized a lot of us, that nobody wants to stand up, speak up, or do the right thing, and just let the evil forces take over. That can't be good for we the people, our children, their children's children. I could see someday where the United States is all in an enslaved state, like Hunger Games movie, and people will say, we should have known. If we'd have known, we could have done something about it. Well, in my opinion, the word's out there. We can do something about it. Number 3, parts of the towers were thrown up to 500 feet laterally. So if they were collapsing, pieces of steel wouldn't shoot out like bullets 500 feet. You know how far 500 feet is? Think about an RV. An RV is 37 feet long. So line up about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times 3. Wow, 3 RVs would be 100 feet. So 3 times 5. So you need 15 RVs. Steel zagging right out, lodged in other buildings. As discussed earlier, Hoffman, the downward forces of gravity collapse cannot account for the energetic lateral ejection of pieces. This guy's a physicist, smarter guy than I. I do have an electronic technician degree. I worked at a major aerospace company for 10 years, mostly on research and development. So I was an electronic expert. I knew a little bit about mathematics. And a fire or a building falling wouldn't have metal girders spewing out. Thermite would. But what forces caused those lateral explosions? Page 67. Explosions were visible before many floors had collapsed. So there were flashes, explosions, heard and seen on video. on audio recordings. But in the South Tower collapse, writes Hoffman, energetic dust ejections at first seen, while the top is only slightly tipping, not falling. So, energetic dust ejections before the buildings are even falling. So somebody's setting off the thermite explosives, maybe? There is no known source of the dense powder in these clouds of ejected dust. We have also cited numerous eyewitness reports of explosions in the buildings. Number 5, the tower's top mushroomed into thick dust clouds much larger than the original volumes of the buildings. So we all know what a nuclear explosion looks like. Looks like a big mushroom cloud. Without the addition of large sources of pressure beyond the collapse itself, claims Hoffman, the falling building and its debris should have occupied about the same volume as the intact building. Number 6, the tops fell at nearly the rate of freefall. There's just no way that steel inside girders, a whole big square box, stairways and elevators, and outside perimeters, all tied together with concrete, could free fall. Impossible. 100% impossible. Again, explanation, thermite explosions. And I'm certain that the Arabs didn't manage that. Okay. The forms of resistance, had the collapse been gravity-driven, would include the destruction of the structural integrity of each story, the pulverization of the concrete in the floor slabs of each story, and other non-metallic objects, and the acceleration of the remains of each story encountered either outward or downward. There would have to be enough energy to overcome all these forces of resistance and do it rapidly enough to keep up with the near free fall acceleration. So even if there were some give or take because of fires, the pancakes would fall and hit the layer below it, and it'd be this sudden stop. In other words, boom, 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 boom. And it wouldn't just free fall. So some kind of energy was taking out the lower levels ahead of time, milliseconds ahead of time. So it would free fall. And that's what they do in demolition. The issue of the cause of the collapse of the towers has become so salient that one wealthy American activist, Jimmy Walter, has offered $1 million reward to anyone who can prove that explosions were not used in the World Trade Center. Walter has gained notoriety and headlines by his efforts, costing him millions, to educate ordinary Americans and Europeans about the possibility that 911 was an inside job. Details of his work can be found at reopen911.org. So just like myself and many others included, a lot of people are trying to wake the people on the planet up, costing some people millions. Costed me now 13 years of my life doing the research because I was asking myself that one perplexing question. What the heck is going on? Who's responsible? How many people have told me, you know, Rick, you're right, something is going on, but who? Then when you say, well, maybe it's Lucifer's, satanic, all these cults, they start giggling. Then when you ask them, well, don't you believe in God? Oh, no, that's old news. I was in grade school, high school. They told us that was all done by these organizations. The religions were created to make us obedient slaves. I go, do you believe you have a soul or a spirit when you die? Oh no, when you die, you're gone. People have been mind controlled. What can you say? We have to somehow figure out how to unmind control all of us, ourselves. Page 68. An equally detailed and shocking analysis of the collapse of all three buildings came recently from an unexpected quarter, Brigham Young University in the heart of the conservative state of Utah. An equally detailed and shocking analysis of the collapse of all three buildings. Professor Stephen Jones. Again, we're talking about people smarter than I. I'm smart enough to read a book and use my God-given brain to think about it. But you got these physicists and professors. Listen to them. Don't listen to me. Don't listen to Jim Mars. Read his book. Get yourself a notepad like I do. Take some notes. Look up stuff. And use your rational mind. And once you come to the conclusion that I have, that this is inside secret societies, Illuminati, Zionists, communists, Freemasonry top levels, witchcraft covens, all these people into the occult, into Satan, Luciferian, including apparently beings, fallen angels, watchers, archons, Nephilim, Anunnaki, whatever you want to call them. But they're trying to make us believe it's the Galactic Federation. And the alien beings from other planets are coming to save us. I haven't seen any of these alien beings come out and get the truth out. I see somebody speaking the truth, even if it was President Donald Trump stopping the chemtrails from being continuing on, dumping chemicals in our sky, then maybe I'll believe that we're getting saved, that things can be turned around. But they're out there sky spraying today. I was just outside this morning. So anyways, Professor Stephen Jones of the Department of Physics and Astronomy at Brigham Young University, in a paper accepted for peer review, stated it is quite possible that explosives were pre-planted in all three buildings and set off after the two plane crashes, which were actually a diversion tactic. Muslims are probably not to blame for bringing down the WTC building after all. But who would have thunk that? We've seen the results. You think these Muslims are so stupid to do something like that? All those people, so that their countries would be bombed to smithereens and they would all be murdered? People need to use some common sense on some of these false flags we're hearing about even today. The repercussions, it doesn't take a genius to say to yourselves, if you were a bunch of intelligent Arabs and you were not happy with the Zionists destroying all your towns and cities and killing off your peoples, planning for a greater Israel, if you're sitting there and go, well, let's blow up a few of their buildings, you got to know the repercussions would be astronomical. It would mean certain destruction and doom. So it doesn't make sense with me. And even when they say that we people in the USA, people like myself, people like Jim Mars. So the CIA and the FBI says we're persons of interest. We got to check into them, see if they're plotting to overthrow the government. When people like me would never do violent things, kill people, steal all the stuff that they've been stealing. There are a lot of good CIA agents, FBI people in the military, police officers, but I think a lot of them are probably feeling helpless also. All right, Jones acknowledged that there may have been many junk science conspiracy theories about what happened on 9/11, but concluded I have called attention to glaring inequities in the final reports funded by the U.S. government. I have also presented multiple evidences for an alternate hypothesis. In particular, the official theory lacks repeatability in that no actual models or buildings before or since 9/11/2001 have been observed to completely collapse due to the proposed fire-based mechanisms. On the other hand, dozens of buildings have been completely or symmetrically demolished through the use of pre-positioned explosives. And high-temperature chemical reactions can account for the observed large pools of molten metal under both towers in World Trade Center Building 7, which was not hit by a plane, and the solidification of structural steel. So it actually had pools of molten steel. The controlled demolition hypothesis cannot be dismissed as junk science because it better satisfies test of repeatability and parsimony. It ought to be seriously, scientifically investigated and debated. What's that old adage? Usually the simplest explanation is the true story. Asked by one news reporter, who set the explosives? Jones replied, I try not to go there because we have to answer the first question first, the scientific issue first. We need to consider all options for the collapse of these buildings and let the chips fall where they may. Let the chips fall where they may. I just walked over to my bookcase and just grabbed a couple books. I could have grabbed 100, but the first 6 I'll just show you. Who are the culprits? The End of America, Naomi Wolf. Letter of Warning to a Young Patriot. Naomi Wolf's End of America is a vivid, urgent, mandatory wake-up call that addresses momentous issues of tyranny, democracy, and survival. The framers of our Constitution fully understood that it can happen here. Patriots like Madison, Paine, Franklin would certainly applaud Naomi Wolf and recognize her as a sister in her struggle. Think about it. America declares independence from Britain. People came from all over Europe and the world to seek freedom. They came from all over the world to seek freedom. The people who founded this country created the Constitution to protect us from the whole world where people fled from. Is it any wonder that they've been working behind the scenes to do the same thing to the USA that they've done to the world? The deception is endless. The facts are clear. The evidence is clear. The people that caused everybody else to flee for hundreds of years to go to America, to live free. And then, of course, I got another book here. The people who run our military. It's a disgrace what they do. They torture people for pleasure. With all the high technologies we have, all the evidence that we have, what the world should know, Guantanamo. Many of us already know that imperial policies abroad undermine democracy at home. You think? The Illuminati, the Zionists, so much more. Guantanamo, the world should know, drives this point home like a nail through butter. Abusing people and violating international law will make us less secure, not more secure. The policies of the Bush administration must be reversed as a priority issue of national security. And we can say that Obama did pretty much the same thing, if not worse, on helping to destroy, overthrow countries in the Middle East, and legislation to destroy the U.S. Constitution and our freedoms and our rights. When he was reelected, Mr. Obama, his two top priorities, so he said in his inauguration speech, you can go look up and listen to. My first two top priorities are gay marriage and removing guns from the Americans. Why do you think they want to remove guns from the Americans? I'm paraphrasing, but that's what his two top priorities were. Take a hard look at this picture. That could be me, tied up there being tortured. You, anybody. Who did you talk to? What do you know? What are they planning? These people who control our world are seriously paranoid. They're worried about getting caught. The shadows of power. Like I said, the simplest answer is probably the true answer. Who did have President Kennedy assassinated? Who did 9/11? Who did the Oklahoma City bombing with all the CIA, FBI offices or whatever was in there? Who? Why? The Council of Foreign Relations and the American decline. I keep mentioning the Council of Foreign Relations. Most of our leaders were part of the Council of Foreign Relations before they got into office. You have to grow up through the ranks of these secret organizations and have yourself proven, or also they have to get something on you, like George Bush, John Kerry, and the Skull and Bones. Go look up and watch some videos on what went on there, what goes on there. Who owns the world? I've got so many books to read and share. The surprising truth about every piece of land on the planet. Trilateralism, the Trilateral Commission, and elite planning for world management. Do you think they plan on managing the world so it's actually a better place for us? World management also means what the USA Georgia Guidestones tell us. Northern Georgia. Go look it up and look at what they say. They want to reduce the world population to 500 million. 6 billion people have to die if there's that many people on the planet. But they use nice words. World management. Give me a break. These elites are not going to move out of their gated communities and their mansions and their castles. And they're not going to stop making all that money creating wars and having people killed. Pedophilia, spirit cooking, Pizzagate. They're not going to do that. Born in Blood. Look at the title. These are famous authors. I have to read this book. I've looked at it, read some of it. The Lost Secrets of Freemasonry. So what's behind these secret societies? Why do they put their hand on the Bible and swear to have their throat cut if they divulge the secrets? They have to obey the master. Anyways, back to the book. All right. So, on the other hand, dozens of buildings have been completely and symmetrically demolished through the use of pre-positioned explosives. And high-temperature chemical reactions can account for the observed large pools of molten metal. The controlled demolition hypothesis cannot be dismissed as junk science. So who did it? I suspect it's the elite who control our world. How do you gain the confidence or the acceptance of the population that you're going to go over to the Middle East and start destroying all those countries? You can't. You have to have a big catalyst, a big event, a false flag. All right, so let the chips fall where they may. It says on this book by this professor, and I believe anyone with common sense can agree that the elites did it. And who are the elites? And do they have a religion? I believe there's simple answers for both of those. The elites are the same people who have been elites throughout the years, thousands of years. Kings and queens, dukes, princes, Zionist Jewish folks into the Kabbalah, mysticism, these cults, secret societies, as common denominators here. Somehow working in connection with demonic forces even mentioned in the Bible, fallen angels, archons, watchers, Pleiadians, Anunnaki, reptilians, gray aliens. All this stuff's been prophesized. It's pretty clear. Once you know the answer, it's more interesting to look at the information again, watch videos. Once you know the answer, you just keep putting pieces of the puzzle together. As noted earlier, in 2006, Jones teamed with James Fitzer, the distinguished McKnight University professor of philosophy at the University of Minnesota, Duluth, a former Marine Corps officer, to found the organization Scholars for 911truth.org. Scholars for 911truth.org. You know, these people who are professors and scholars and physicists, saving this planet isn't up to just a few of them. All of us have to use our God-given brain. That's why Jim Marrs probably wrote these books, as many as he's written. Good portion of his life after being a journalist for numerous newspapers around Texas. The two co-chairs and their nationwide membership have brought a new credibility to the rapidly expanding movement for the truth about 911. And again, I'll say it again. We people who are seeking the truth, just because we know it does not mean we have to do anything violent or blowing up things or thinking about shooting things or overthrowing countries. We have rights. We can get together. We can vote. And largely, I have to say, we can do something they don't want us to do, is we can talk to the spiritual world. We can say, hey, God, we need your help. And if you believe in the spiritual world and you believe in the power of the mind, you know that that'll work. We can reject transgenderism and pansexualism and all that other stuff, adultery, drugs, seeing other people murdered. We can say no, even if it's no in our minds and it's no when we talk to our friends. Because everything we do, according to my understanding, in the Akashic records, etc., is recorded. Everything. When you die, you have to account for your actions. I think a lot of people go, man, I wish I'd have done something. But we can't fall into the trap that they would like people that are weak-minded or mentally ill to do violent things. That's not who we, the people, are. The people who control our planet are like that, and they would like us to be like them. Back to the book. Concerns over the validity of the free fall scenario based on fires in the buildings was echoed by former Bush 1 administration officer Morgan Reynolds, a Texas A&M professor emeritus of economics, who was also former chief economist for the Department of Labor and former director of the Criminal Justice Center at the National Center for Policy Analysis. Wow. So what's this guy have to say? Reynolds is also a leading member of the Scholars for 911truth.org. So this guy was working for George Bush Sr. in his administration, and apparently a smarter guy than I. And he's also a member of the Scholars for 911 Truth. So again, you don't have to stand alone when you decide that there's something wrong and you need to speak up. Even if you just write an editorial to your local newspaper, post things on the internet, press releases and comments. There's so much we all can do everywhere. We could overwhelm the enemy of the people of the planet. There are billions of us and just a few of them. Only professional demolition appears to account for the full range of facts associated with the collapses of World Trade Center 1, the North Tower, World Trade Center 2, the South Tower, and the much overlooked collapse of the 47-story World Trade Center Building 7 at 5:21 p.m. on that fateful day, wrote Reynolds. So this guy was well-placed, well-educated, part of the Bush senior administration, and only professional demolition appears to account for the full range of facts. Now, who are you going to believe? The people trying to cover it up or the people who did it? A lot of insiders in government are saying it had to be demolition. He added controlled demolition would have required unimpeded access to the World Trade Center, access to explosives, avoiding detection, and the expertise to orchestrate the deadly destruction from a nearby secure location. When you go look up books like Webster Tarpley's 911 Synthetic Terror, books like this and many others, and you find out whose relatives were in charge of security of the Twin Towers and who was in charge of security at the airports. The culprits are easily to be identified, but nobody wants to look and see the truth. He added, I just said that, such access before 911 likely depended on complicity by one or more WTC security companies. Just put in those words. Who was in charge of the World Trade Center security during 911? Let's go online, look at some videos. You'll get the answer. You may not like it. What are you going to do about it when you find out the truth? His detailed analysis of both the World Trade Center collapses and the Pentagon strike may be found at www.lewrockwell.com, Reynolds/Reynolds12-html. So lewrockwell.com/Reynolds/Reynolds12.html. Reynolds also speculated on why WT7 was brought down later on 911. Why would the killers destroy WTC7, especially since a collapse would arouse suspicion in some quarters? A logical, if unproven, theory is that the perpetrators used Mayor Giuliani's sealed Office of Emergency Management, OEM's bunker on the 23rd story of the WTC-7 to conduct the Twin Tower implosions, and then destroyed the building and evidence to cover up their crimes, just as a murderer might set his victim's dwelling ablaze to cover up the crime. Giuliani's undisclosed secret location was perfect because it had been evacuated by 9:45 a.m. on 911 and enabled unmolested work, provided a ringside seat, was bullet and bomb resistant, and had its own secure air and water supply, and could withstand winds of 160 miles an hour, necessary protection from the wind blast generated by collapsing skyscrapers. Before I read on, I just thought of something while I took a 2-minute break. But there are powers that control our planet. I've shown the books. Got many videos on YouTube. So do many other people. There have been accusations that it is serpent. The symbols are everywhere. This is Tex Mars' book. We're talking about Jim Mars, and they weren't related that they knew of, probably cousins, both from Texas. but the holy serpent of the Jews. So I have to say, these people have a God. And apparently the people that control our planet, and make no mistake about this, believe and probably enjoy killing people, treating other people subservient. They have some kind of megalomaniac mental problem. Evil people. Mass murderers. Child pedophilias. Deceivers. Look at the Bible. So I'm making a point. There are people who have no qualms about killing people. Can we all agree on that? A lot of Jewish people have been warning us about this other group of Jewish people who are into some kind of cults. The people behind the Freemasons, if you read my book, series number 61, the Blue Lodge Handbook, 12 2-hour videos, it's referencing Jerusalem, King Solomon's temple. King Solomon had a 6-pointed ring, like you see here on the star, behind the serpent, eating a person. You see it? King Solomon, it's told, had a 6-pointed ring, star, that he could call forth demons. Do you get it? Demons. They were his power. They could kill. They got no problem with killing. Aleister Crowley, my series 23, made a video after I read all this book. I would not quote the words verbally, because it even said in the book, be aware of speaking these words, because they're called incantations, magic. You have to be careful what you think. But my point is, he describes Lamb and Iowas in that book, the book of the law, and the only law is do as thou wilt. The second law is refer to number 1, do as thou wilt. And what it describes they do, you have to go watch my video, it's quite horrible, is to treat the rest of us like they do now. Murdering all the Arabs and plannings for the rest of us. Look at this, the star in this being here. When I looked up Lamb and Iowas and Aleister Crowley's beings, I want to find a picture here. These are what the beings look like. Aleister Crowley's Lamb and Little Gray Men. And also, when I was referencing some of the beings they talked about in Aleister Crowley's book, the Book of the Law, and some of the gods they were talking about, I found this at the Yahoo image site. Isn't this Egyptian hieroglyphics? So I looked up ancient Egyptian Seth. So I'm just trying to say, okay, their God thrives on torture, murder, creating a horrible world for the rest of us. Well, that's not my God. My God says this. 6th commandment, thou shalt not kill. Moses got the tablets when he went up to the mountain. He was Jewish. He was Hebrew. And when he came down the mountain, a lot of the Hebrews, the Jewish people, had collected all the gold amongst themselves and had constructed a golden calf, which is in the Egyptian hieroglyphics, and were worshiping it, having a drunken sexual orgy, modus operandi. And he smashed the tablets. Moses smashed them. The tablets he got from God. And he had to punish the Jews, the Hebrews, and he had to go back up to the mountain for 40 days to get 2 more tablets. Thou shalt not kill. So Moses is God, my God. Moses was Hebrew. And Jesus is God. Jesus is Father. Jesus has added another commandment. It's in the Bible. I've gone over those videos. And the commandment, and that's the word Jesus used, commandment, said, ye are commanded to love one another. So what I'm trying to say is, we have some people who worship a God who want to kill humans. We have a God that's trying to tell people what to do and what to think, who does not want to kill humans. So we all have a choice of which God we want. And there's a lot of deception out there, confusing people. But those are two basic points, and the people who did 911, obviously, are of the God that worships Satan, Lucifer, Ra, Horus, Isis, Osiris, Moloch, and so many other names, Baal. Remember, they wanted to put the archway of Baal up in New York and London, which is the archway to the devil. Why do they want to open up a portal to the devil? All these satanic symbolisms everywhere. And then I found out through UNESCO, out of the United Nations, they were trying to put up 1,000 of those archways of Baal all over the planet. There are some satanic rituals and actions taking place right now. Pardon me for my speaking today. Some days I'm better, sometimes I don't do so well. I think I'm getting my point across. Alright, I want to finish up this video with a little reading from this book. The professor also joined the chorus of criticism leveled at FEMA officials for the rapid removal of the WTC debris, which prevented later study. So they had to get rid of those steel girders and the dust, all the evidence, because they didn't want to get caught. The criminal code requires that crime scene evidence be saved for forensic analysis, but FEMA had it destroyed before anyone could seriously investigate it, stated Reynolds. So Reynolds was a previous high-level employee of the Bush 1 administration. Who are you going to believe? Can you believe your own mind? Can you believe your own common sense thinking? Denial and apathy is going to get us nowhere. FEMA was in a position to take command because it had arrived the day before, get this, the attacks at New York's Pier 29. So the day before 9/11, FEMA had arrived in New York, in town, to conduct war game exercises. And we hear this all the time. Sandy Hook, Boston bombing. So not only was FEMA having war game exercises in town, but apparently the Air Force and the military, with Dick Cheney in charge, had ordered all the aircraft, military aircraft, dispersed away from the area to places all over the country for these war games. And the war game exercise was Tripod 2. Quite a coincidence, don't you think? Again, it doesn't take much for us to say to ourselves, wait a minute. This is beyond coincidental. The authorities apparently considered the rubble quite valuable. New York City officials had every debris truck tracked on GPS. So why would they be tracking these trucks on GPS with the debris in them? And had one truck driver who took an unauthorized 1.5-hour lunch fired. So you're hauling away garbage, you take a 1.5-hour lunch, and they fire you. That's kind of ridiculous. I mean, you do get a lunch hour. So this garbage was much more valuable than normal garbage. Responding to the question of why controlled demolitions have never been considered by the official government investigations of 9/11, Reynolds said, if demolition destroyed 3 steel skyscrapers at the World Trade Center on 9/11, then the case for an inside job and a government attack on America would be compelling. We know it was demolition, and we know it was an inside job. Military affairs journalist Barbara Honninger honed their arguments to an even sharper point before offering the chilly conclusion that if bombs were placed inside both the Pentagon and the WTC buildings, it would have been difficult, if not impossible, for foreign terrorists to have the opportunity to plant and detonate such bombs. Because the true modus operandi of the WTC and the Pentagon attacks are so similar, a single group of U.S. domestic conspirators almost certainly planned both the WTC and Pentagon attacks and controlled both the approaching planes and inside the building explosions in real time on 9/11, and thus neither attack could have been executed by Al-Qaeda. Page 70 of this book. So I think I've made my point. I would encourage people to go buy, obtain, borrow it from a friend, the library, The Terror Conspiracy, 9/11 Deception by Jim Marrs. Great guy. I've been watching his videos, listening to him talk for years, along with a lot of other people. Crossfire, The Plot That Killed Kennedy, my part 1 of this review of some of Jim Marrs' books, who just died recently. And he has many other books, even on aliens, psychic spies for the government. There's more to reality than we all know, I keep saying. That's why my videos and the books I read and my research is so eclectic on so many different topics, because I believe it's all connected. Thank you for watching my video. Rick Merico reporting.